terms of Masais.
Yeah, if you are a Masai, what is happening to you if you live in high lying area, medium lying area, low lying? Is it affecting your income in any way? According to the data presented there.
Let's assume the data is correct. Let's not.
Not the income.
It's not the income.
Maybe they have more livestock in high-lying areas. I don't know.
Livestock numbers are not changing. Livestock is 35, 31, 42. That's what
we're getting natural resources from those areas, so the income is not changing.
Income is not changing.
So basically, in terms of benefit, there is no difference. But in terms of cost,
Losses. Yeah. So maybe one main message could be something like that. You know, wherever the Maasai live, frankly speaking, they earn as much. That's not the problem. But what's happening to them is when they live closer to human beings, then they are, you know, sorry. When they live closer to lions, they're in a worse off situation than otherwise. Okay, so that could be a message, and this could, I mean, you can sell this. How did we sell it? I forgot how we sold it.
no, that's what that is its own.
Yeah. So I mean, also another thing that I didn't talk about. If you add up this and then actually estimate it for poverty line figure, this actually comes down to lesser than poverty line. You know, $50 per day poverty. $1 per day? Oh, 50 rupees per day, sorry. $1 per day. This comes down to $1 per day per person. Okay? So if you look at it like that, that also can be a story. Wherever they live, they are anyway under the poverty line. But all the more, the Maasai are in trouble because they are living in high lying areas. Okay? So this can be also a story. So where we can actually talk about, frankly speaking, their lifestyles are not great anyway. But all the more, because of our conservation interests or whatever, we are making them, whatever, we are jeopardizing their whatever. Okay? So that can be a main message, something like that.
Let's go with that.
Okay, let's go with that.
That's
Okay. Now let's just write an abstract.
First is, why are you doing this?
Why are we doing this?
This study.
Because there's the cost of coexistence for living in the world.
Okay. You're doing it because we want to know what is the cost of living near land. Is that okay? Okay. The next one, what did you do? Question and services. Okay.
And you basically, you stratified your question and service into
High,
into
medium.
medium, into high, medium.
Okay, so this is what will go into the second section. Then, what is the third? What was it that we found?
Similar income, but very high liquidation in the high land areas.
Similar income.
Very high loss.
High liquidation in high line. Okay, that's your main message, right? That's your main story.
What does this mean?
What does it mean? What does this mean? Let's just stick to this one thing. What is? Let's not go into something that's speculative on some other level. What does this generally mean?
Chances of conflict increases with density.
That's what we are going to face problems. Okay, let's put that down. And basically, it sounds like a reverse of this, but yeah, okay, but something like that. This basically means that high line areas.
Somebody
Yeah.
pointed out that there might be need requirement for compensation
Yeah,
if you want to maintain.
that's also fine. Yeah. So high line areas require more investment to offset the costs of living. Yeah. And then finally, what is good about it? What is the last one? What's it good for? Yeah. What is it good for? What is this whole study good for? This is what should tie in everything into back into your main message and your what you set out to do.
Long-term conservation of lines in that area, and as well as conservation of the, their persistence.
Where to target the conservation investments?
Okay, where to target conservation investments. Another thing. Okay, fine. Okay, so all of this is fine, I agree. But there's one little bigger pitch that you can make for it. So if you've seen recently, there was a science paper that talked about conservation investments. It talks about how much money various governments and non-government organizations have pitched for conservation. And it sums up all the amount of money that's available and looks at how much money is not available. So then what this story can say is that in the context of minimum resources for conservation, how best to judicially use what little we have, or something like that. And to pitch it like that. So if you pitch it in the context of, say, a recent science paper or a recent nature paper, then chances are just generally itself a bigger journal will take, because you're able to tie it into a story that is currently considered, the hottest topics in conservation. Okay, so one of the other things that we all have to do consciously is try and read science papers and nature papers. I mean, it doesn't have to completely apply to what you're doing, but read them. Read them because sometimes you just get some quirky idea from the middle of something that can, sell your work a little better than normal. For example, a recent science paper that came was sharing or sparing land, for conservation. And this talked about agriculture and biodiversity. That's an interesting story. So even many of us do work where we are working with species that, cannot live in, modified habitats. And we also work in some places where animals are living in already modified habitats. And they're doing well, not that they're doing badly. So the thing is to pick something like, the science story, where we talk about sharing or sparing, and then put it in context of whatever you're doing. So the moment you bring in a big journal idea, like a science or a nature, then automatically, in many ways, your work does kind of do a little better than, if you didn't think about that idea. Okay? So in this particular case, what's good? I'll just say, in the context of little money for conservation, this work prioritizes some action. Yeah. Some investment. Is that okay? Does that sound like a paper? So we made a paper out of that table. Does everyone agree? Or someone feels that we still didn't make a good paper out of that table? You can always have opinions, sorry. Is it okay? Are we going to sell this? I think it's good. Pretty good. It's sellable. Huh? We'll just submit it. Let's put all our names on this and submit this to some place.
The best part about this approach is, usually what happens is we have our results ready, then we start thinking what to do with it. If we just spend this much time, it took us approximately 15 to 20 minutes to come up with this whole thing. Okay, the entire logical framework that the paper follows. So you can actually have the framework in place before you start writing your introduction, or methods, or results. So that's the only advantage. And so I think it's a big advantage to have.
basically all this does is clarifies your work. So like Monica was saying, you have a data set ready, you have your analysis ready, you have multiple messages. So you figure out what are your messages. Maybe make a huge table and say message 1, message 2, message 3. What have you done? Why is that message 1 important? So you put down the question there. For all of them, you make 3 separate sets of, answering these questions. And then see how much is common. Then if you are able to still identify that, okay, 1 and 3 are actually more common than 2 and 3 or something like that, then maybe you can still think of ways to subset one into the other. But the thing is, this will be a great framework to use. And very often, I'm using it right now for one of my papers. And frankly, it's helped. It's really helped. I never expected it to help. When I saw the thing, I looked at it and I said, hey, this sounds so ideal and surely it's not going to work. But fortunately, it really did work. Yeah? Okay. So, based on the main message and the working abstract, now we're going to write down a title. So, what title will we give that? And most often for a title, don't go beyond 12 words. So you have a 25-word main message and a 12-word title. So what will we give a title? I don't mind the main message itself as a title. It sounds decent. Yeah? But also another very important thing in a title, you got to be careful, is not to oversell your work. Your title should not say something that your paper doesn't completely convey. For example, conservation success leads to conflict. In our case, it sounds decent. Okay? But let's say this, you use a title like conservation success leads to conflict, and maybe have conflict coming in just one sentence, or you qualifying conservation success being just one anecdotal evidence, then that doesn't make it. Okay, so you really, when you think of a title, you really have to ensure that every word in the title has either a context, a method, or an analysis associated with it. And without any of that featuring, it's not good to write a title that is, general, for example.
Actually, in this case, for that matter, there's no evidence in the table per se that the high line density was due to conservation.
Exactly.
Okay, that's true. That's a good one. Yeah.
So main message does not exactly correspond.
Fine. Yeah. So that's also good. Yeah. So maybe how would you change that?
I'm still
So if you ask a question, I'm going to ask you how you're going to change it. I'm
still
not thinking.
But I don't think that's
Okay.
yeah.
Fine. I agree. Okay. So maybe what we can then say is, let's not talk about conservation success. Let's just say lions exist in some natural variation. And what is happening is those people who are living in those high lion areas are the ones affected. So the story then becomes that, frankly speaking, they are not doing great in life anyway, because they are all below poverty. But all the more, living next to lions makes them incur a new kind of cost that is maybe making their situation worse off. Okay, so maybe that can be the main message, and talk about how Maasai in the lion areas are in a worse off situation than something else. That could be the story. Okay, let's assume that this is fine.
Yeah, but then they have civilian input.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm so sorry for that hypothetical thinking. I didn't think of all the issues through it. But let's assume. Yeah. But that's what's happening. That's what's happening. Everything else is fine. So they are able to compensate for their losses, but they still are losing something. So maybe there the compensation story can take precedence or something like that. Yeah?
Yeah, but one thing is like people who are living in lowland area, so they have to buy stuff, maybe like feed for their
For their
livestock,
livestock.
something like that.
Yeah, that's
So
also.
that's like to input
That-
in their income.
Yeah, that's also.
So that's why their output
It's
goes
probably-
into buying stuff.
That's also possible. Yeah. So yeah, of course, we need to analyze the data set. Okay. Okay. Then the other thing is, of course, you send your main message, working abstract, and thing to all your co-authors, and then most often your co-authors will just say, "Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead." They're never going to add anything to it, and then you decide on what you want to display in your paper. Yeah. So this is something that again I learned from this conservation bytes thing, is to have an upper limit of just 6. 6 tables and figures put together, nothing more. Okay. If your entire story can be told within 6 tables and 6 figures put together, right? It's like you can make it 3-3 if you want, or 2-4 if you want. That's fine, but keep it like that. So limit it to this.
And basically, if you have more, nowadays all journals allow you to put online appendices. Okay, so I'm currently working on a paper with 6, and I have some 7 or 8 supplementary tables. So the thing is, they advise you that if you have too many and you are not able to put the number down, prioritize. Draw up a list of priority, pick the top 6, chuck everything else into the supplementary material. So otherwise what happens is, I'm sure while reading papers also, if there are lots of tables, it puts all of us off. Like you cannot really pay attention to concentrate on everything. So
same with graphs. If you have similar looking graphs coming again and again and again with some small difference, male one, female another, or habitat 1, habitat 2, habitat 3, habitat 4.
they make it a subparts of one figure.
Yeah. So that the clarity is there, and then also you're not wasting the amount of print space, because think of it in terms of print space. Every single graph you add is going to be more space, and if you're going to pay for it, you're paying something like about $100 per page or something like that. Then you're actually increasing your own costs of production. Okay, and then after that, oh yeah, the other thing is when you do your work, always write your create your figures and tables, and make sure that they are standalones. Okay, so if anyone just picks up one graph, just the graph and the legend around it should be able to tell you everything about that graph. It should not have anything that is unexpected. Okay, that you have to go back to the paper to find some small print somewhere which says that okay, this means that. That should never be the case. You should always try and make it as big as possible. And then of course, this is circulate your choice of this one to all your co-authors, and then they will also get back to you saying, oh yeah, everything is fine, just go ahead. So that's what happens. And then of course, then you plan your skeleton. So even in this skeleton, follow the similar logic. And in this, what we do is we of course put in the title. The abstract is usually written last. The keywords you can always take care. But introduction, methods, results, discussion, these things, it's good for you to actually put it down on paper and say that the first paragraph of my introduction will have this sentence. Okay? And it can just be an idea. The first one for this particular thing can be the first main message, opening sentence can be lots of money is put into conservation, but very often we don't know how best to use it and where to use it, how to prioritize conservation funds. So that can be your start. Then you can say, in terms of large carnivore conservation, maybe the second paragraph. In terms of large carnivore conservation, most of the money that has been coming has been going towards building populations, but it has not looked at communities living around lion areas. So we can, this looks at that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to check all this. I'm just going to leave it on the PowerPoint in the Ferris thing. Yeah. So basically, this is just a spell out of what is there on the conservation bytes. So you can just go through all of that. But what I'm going to just quickly think are the don'ts. So don't ever put a reference or an undefined abbreviation in your abstracts. Okay. Yeah. Then after that, keywords. Again, many of us write our titles and then put our keywords and then we just pick words from the title and stuff like that. Don't ever do that. Because these are just indexing styles, right? So your title will anyway be indexed. Every word in your title gets indexed, say in Google Scholar or something. And in addition to that, your keywords get indexed. So you want to increase the chance that somebody finds your paper. So what you do is you put a bunch of words, say food habits of small carnivores in Desert National Park. Then you bring in keywords that are not there in the title. Things like, what are the species? Maybe you can say the jungle cat, desert cat, something else. Then diet, because you are looking at food habits, you can change the word to diet. Because some people will search for food habits, some people will search for diets. So you put diet. Then overlap, because frankly when you talk about multiple carnivores, you're most often talking about some sort of an overlap. And then scat analysis, because that's what you did, and then competition. Yeah? So something like that. So you always make it complementary so that you increase your search. And then of course, as I told you, the introduction, you start with a big bang. You start with, we don't know where to invest money, and our work shows you where to invest money. So that's your main message. Okay? And even in this, going back to what Neeraj was asking about introduction, how to write introduction, very often, I think this is kind of a hangover of the reports that we write. When we start writing habitat selection by cheetal was studied by A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, all the authors in the world who have done habitat selection on cheetal. But that's not the way you do it. Just go down in an introduction. Suppose you want to say cheetal, habitat preference was studied by also. Even if you want to use that sentence, just pull out the first person who did it. Maybe, just say that, okay, so and so did it in 1921, and then someone did it in 2011, and then in between you just pull out one. So don't go more than 3 references.
And in the first place, never write anything like that.
Yeah, first of all,
Okay.
don't write that.
Say for example, you are doing cheetal habitat selection in a place, and what basically you have done is maybe picked up some remote sense variables or plot-based data validation variables, and you built models to talk about cheetal habitat selection. Okay, so there's no point to talk about what other people did if that doesn't relate to your study. You can straight away come to some statement in the introduction which says that cheetals are known to prefer open, low-lying habitat, because you are planning to use elevation as a covariate in your model. Okay, habitat, how open it is, heterogeneity is there. Like maybe those are covariates that you are going to use in your analysis. So use those references which completely relate to your study. There's no point in talking about redundant stuff which anybody did. Okay, so basically your introduction, the literature survey that you do for your study should be completely related to the analysis that you are going to do. And also like you have to talk about, when you do a literature survey, you talk about what are the gaps that are there in that subject area. There also talk about the gaps that you are going to fill in through your study. It's no point saying that nothing is known about this species, morphology, and then you are doing some food habits of the species. Okay, so talk about those gaps which your study is going to address. So that's also there. So in that way, you can make your literature survey much more directed in your introduction.
And again, of course, one other thing is when citing references, focus on the idea and not on the people who did it. So it's like you want to impress somebody, just don't keep putting so and so and so and so. Maybe let me just come up with a common name, Singh. So you just don't want to put Singh 1999, 1992, 1993, 1990 something else. Don't put it like that. You just want to highlight one of the stories. And of course, this is what goes to. Yeah. And then finally, when you end your introduction paragraph, is you want to end it with something about your objectives or your hypothesis. Okay? I don't know if you've seen most of the journals nowadays, especially the higher rated journals, usually the hypothesis is set in terms of a prediction and a hypothesis and a prediction. Okay? And that's a very nice framework to go by, because then that clarifies your stand on what you're expecting, and it makes it very clear both to a reviewer and to a reader what your final result is going to be. So I now started following this. Almost every paper that I write, I'm now I'm squeezing it also. But I try to make a hypothesis, I try to bring in prediction and try to test it like that. In truth, actually, that's what we all do when we do our research. But somewhere down the line in our analysis, in the muddle of all the numbers we have, we lose out the main story. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Okay? And of course, some journals would like you to also state your main message in the end of your introduction. But this is something that you'll have to check out with your journal itself. Some journals don't encourage it. Some journals say, please say what it is you finally found. So at the end of it, you can say, we show that, living next to lions is a very costly affair. And we present evidence to show that living next to lions is a costly affair. Okay?
Anybody has any other problems than that cited in the introduction section. We can discuss it.
Does that answer your thing of how to deal with an introduction?
Yes.
So actually, see, the very important thing over here is when you're writing a manuscript, remember that you have to finish your entire story in 10 pages. Okay? And we'll talk about 10 print pages. I mean, manuscript pages can be more, but 10 print pages. So for you to tell your story in such a short span of thing, you really have to crunch it down to the absolute essentials. And even if there is a lot of literature available on your subject, you can, like what I think Upma was saying, you can make it a review paper. Put it up in the beginning. Make it, a review paper and finish it up. And in fact, even for a review paper, you try and have a story, main message. What do you want your review to go towards? What direction do you want your review? It's not because you've reviewed it that you will talk about the review of plants in some place. It doesn't make a difference. Okay? Because everyone knows. So what we need to know is how different is your review from all other reviews that have come up. Do you show the gaps in the existing literature, or do you show that this research, which I'm going to do now, is the most important question? Something like that. So that's also important. Yeah? Okay. So wait, I'm just going to go through some examples of mine. So another thing is when you write your methods, you have to, first of all, you've got to make it so clear that someone is able to replicate it, right? I think that's the basic thing we all learn when we write methods. But sometimes what happens is we go and do work, and then we don't come back with enough sample sizes. Or we don't come back with, we don't do the job, across a larger area, or something like that. Some logistic constraint always limits us. So you have to sell it carefully, because you have to tell them that irrespective of this problem, I have still done the best that I can do. Okay? So I will give you 2 examples of what I did. For example, I had a paper that came out in Applied Ecology. The story was interesting. Tigers increased, leopards decreased. Very simple story. But what happened over there was that because tigers are increasing, first of all, you can't expect when a population recovers, you can't expect sample sizes to be high. It's a very small, limited sample size situation. So what you have to do is sell it. And very often, it's important to even sell it right from the beginning. So in this particular case, what I did is I sold it in my abstract itself. I said that all the various points are there. Although based on small sample sizes, our study revealed that over the 4 years of relocation of pastoralists, tiger population recovered and leopards decreased. So it's important to admit right from the beginning that there is a limitation, but what I'm saying is true. I'm not.
Yeah, but don't leave it at just admitting and not justifying.
Yeah, justify it. Yeah, you have to justify it.